It's now over 2 years since COVID-19 invaded Earth and flipped the life of its inhabitants upside down. People locked themselves in their houses and switched to remote work. Office spaces became empty. But for some, this wasn't so easy. Remote work solutions were out there since many years, although used on a much smaller scale. However, some industries, like visual effects, were very reluctant. Before COVID, barely any VFX studio would agree to hire someone to work remotely. Why was that so, and how the pandemic forced them to change the approach? We'll talk about that in this video. This video was sponsored by F-Track, the creator of Academy Award and Emmy-winning production tracking and media review solutions for the creative industries. F-Track tools are also essential for remote working. I'll tell you more about it at the end of this video. With companies around the world offering its employees to permanently work from home, it seems the future is heading massively towards remote working. But with respect to the VFX industry, the main barrier for the VFX artists to work from home was not so much technical limitations, but the fear of VFX and film production studios that their films will leak online if the footage is not contained within their office space.
I think that everybody working in the VFX industry is aware of the risks and kind of what it would mean for their personal career if any of the material would leak. Also, because the way that this whole workflow is implemented, none of the data is actually stored on artists' workstations. It's just streaming the video signal. And so having your laptop stolen or your computer at home means that there is no sensitive data on it, even when you're kind of a remote artist. So I think like from that point of view, this whole thing works really well.
However, in the beginning of 2020, VFX and film production had to be almost completely shut down because of COVID-19.
Just when COVID hit and it was clear that no film would meet their deadline if they insist on having people work on premise.
As the VFX studios' offices became empty, an online petition was filed by 10,000 visual effects artists to the Motion Picture Association of America and Visual Effects Society, who was then forced to release a statement referring to the impacts of COVID-19 by saying, "We have to find a way to work from home." Of course, there's no better motivation as money. Film studios like Disney, Paramount, Universal and others realized that they have to allow VFX studios to hire people remotely or there will be no new movies made. As a result, this not only urged the VFX companies to find solutions for remote work like the Teradici or HP remote graphics software and turn their offices into remote-based data or technological centers, but also made artists realize that their home-based computer needs some amount of update to adapt to the office requirements. In most cases, they didn't need powerful CPUs and GPUs, as the computing was happening on the studio side. But a typical VFX workstation needs 2 good screens and a drawing tablet. A lot of people didn't have a dual screen setup at home. Many studios allowed artists to take some equipment from office to home in the initial stage of switching to remote work.
One of the big shows that we were working on that year just wrapped photography in February of 2020. So in March, when everything was shut down in Central Europe, we just received plate turnovers, and production, just as well as us, were transitioning into working from home. Yeah, that we kind of coordinated 120 artists from there across Germany to get a grip on what the show is and how it progresses, and that kind of got us until autumn in 2020, where plenty of other shows restarted because they kind of had figured out how to make shoots work during COVID times at that time. But yeah, we got lucky. I mean, I know of plenty of people who got let go by their employers just because there was no work and they were waiting for turnovers of shows that just didn't finish shooting. And we just had that one show already signed that kind of just wrapped the moment that the fun hit the fan. The side from a facility, I think, is also mostly positive. I mean, obviously there is the technical setup that you need to consider to make this whole process as convenient for everyone as possible. Meaning you have to reserve a certain bandwidth for people working at home. The infrastructure needs to be maintained. You have to have a good help desk for people who are experiencing problems to connect. Our IT was doing a terrific job. I mean, we already had VPN access in place for a limited number of people before COVID. So extending that to a larger group of people was definitely challenging, but kind of took our IT less than 2 weeks to transition everybody into home office. I mean, obviously there were still a couple of kinks to be ironed out, like what do you do with dual screen support? How do you get the data rate better? How do you, and so on, you know, like, and yeah, but they did a great job. I mean, they had it up and running in a couple of days for the first bunch of people, and then it went pretty quickly until we had everybody transition to working from home.
One of the leading London-based visual effects company, Cinesite, who was responsible for astonishing visual effects in Black Widow or the latest Bond movie No Time to Die, was one of the fastest companies to adapt to COVID-19 aftermath. They've managed to set up cloud-based technologies to work from home in a smoother manner. According to the chief technology officer of the company gave access to 1,400 of its employees to operate through remote workstations with the help of HP remote graphics software. According to a recent study conducted on the top 50 VFX companies, around 30% of the respondents considered that communication would be a massive barrier if they decide to work from home. But surprisingly, 87% of the employees of these companies agreed that during COVID, their leadership team heavily supported and encouraged them to work from home. Not to forget, around 46% of these companies did not even have a work from home policy or technology set up before the pandemic came into the picture. And now around 55% of the workers of these top 50 companies have also agreed that they would prefer working from home for at least 8 months to a year in the future. In spite of initial fears about remote work efficiency, studios admit that the process is way better than they expected. VFX Studio One of Us was initially aiming at 50% efficiency, but reached 100%. Disney in 2021, with help of over 70 studios from around the world, managed to get 110,000 VFX shots done for their film and episodic productions like Loki, Eternals, Hawkeye, WandaVision, Miss Marvel, The Book of Boba Fett, and many more. That's the best proof of remote work effectiveness that one can get. But it's not just the work culture that is changing with remote work. Most of the VFX artists, especially freelancers, were before forced to travel between companies, cities, or even countries from project to project. For them, remote work introduces more stability to their personal and family life, as they can finally spend much more time at one place, at their homes.
For a lot of people, it eases the pain of commuting to work or having to change location quite frequently. It also adapts better with your private life, meaning you're more flexible with appointments and so on, as long as you kind of stick to the production schedule and are available for the team.
For freelance artists, the work from home process during the pandemic has skyrocketed their demand in the industry, as more clients are looking for freelance artists by understanding that after pandemic, remote projects can be easily conducted and offer a lot of benefits for the employers.
The majority of countries worldwide who can hire in South America, in Asia, in wherever, they can hire teams of 600 people one day and let them go a week later. So for the companies, it's great to be much more flexible in terms of workforce. I would only think or advise that it's still a nightmare for production to keep track of everything. It's a nightmare for communication across the team. Just to keep track on where everyone is, what the priorities are, what everybody's doing is much more challenging than having everybody in the same room. For a supervisor, walking around the room, looking at everybody's screen and seeing like how well people are doing with the given task, or if they're prioritizing the given work as expected, is something that you can pick up on your way to the coffee machine, and you can't when people are working remotely, meaning every bit of information only flows when you actively pursue it. You need to take the phone, you need to get into the messenger, you need to get into a Zoom or Jitsi conference room to actively get in touch with people, to ask them how they're doing. But kind of this passive way of getting a sense of project progress and quality of work, that is something that doesn't exist anymore when everybody's working remotely. So I think for the team, it's not necessarily something that eases the flow of information and makes communication easier. It's pretty much the opposite. And VFX is a team sport, so I kind of enjoy having everybody in the same room.
One of the main disadvantages is that the employees are not being able to share their views or ideas the way they used to in the office in an instant manner. Artists and supervisors are communicating now via chats and video conferences, but that is always limited. Also, it's much more difficult for new artists who, before pandemic, were able to communicate and interact with the seniors at the office to gain more experience and insight about the industry, which they are not able to do in the same manner on remote basis.
I think the key aspect there is that even that senior artist who's working remotely and is doing well at some point learned the job by looking over the shoulder of others when they were still junior artists or interns or trainees at one of the companies where they learned the trade. And this is something to keep in mind, that there is also a certain amount of giving back to the community and giving mentorships to younger people in the industry and teach them the tools is something that we all, when we were younger, probably participated in and that greatly benefited off. And if everybody was working remotely, this whole system of mentoring younger people and giving them a chance to look at our screen, how we solve problems, kind of comes to a halt. And I think that's kind of where we all have kind of a responsibility also to pass on knowledge to up and coming artists. And that's something that we just can't do remotely.
COVID-19 has dramatically changed our lives and the way we work. It is true that VFX artists still need to learn how to interact and communicate better. But the pace at which the VFX industry has shifted and accepted work from home process at such a massive scale in a very short period of time shows that this is totally possible. I don't think that VFX offices will remain empty after pandemic. And that's not just because of technical or communication struggles, but because many of the studios have a great atmosphere and fantastic people, so it's really nice to work on site and socialize. But I hope a balance between remote and on-site work will be developed so that both sides, the artists and the studios, can keep all the positive effects of this new reality.
I think in general the industry will remain kind of a hybrid workforce, but I think that the hybrid model or working remotely will be strictly reserved to people who have proven to be most efficient when they work remotely, or kind of key talent that you rely on to deliver a certain type of show or work that won't travel or aren't available to travel. I think kind of that's the key ingredient. I think the majority of the workforce will move back to the office to improve communication and to kind of feel integrated into team spirit and company culture. And then there will be kind of the workforce that is being employed remotely for reasons of flexibility to kind of meet spontaneous demand when you're delivering a show and you suddenly need 20 additional compositors who aren't living in your region, city, province. Then obviously it's easier to book them remotely and just connect them to the system. It's also a question of ambition of each individual. Like, would you like to supervise a team at some point? Would you like to take more responsibility towards others and so on? And I think certain positions within these options will remain reserved to staff members on site.
As mentioned earlier, F-Track offers solutions that help everyone involved in the visual effects process to collaborate and interact seamlessly, whether they're in the same office or working remotely. F-Track's platform also helps pipeline TDs build robust, competitive pipelines capable of taking on big projects and scaling at demand. F-Track's products are used by major VFX studios and help producing some of the biggest blockbusters. F-Track recently launched CineSync Play, a new free-forever desktop player for frame-accurate review. CineSync Play is now in beta, so you can try it yourself today for free. You can actually trial all of F-Track's products, including F-Track Studio, F-Track Review, and CineSync over at ftrack.com. So what do you think about remote working in the VFX industry? Do you think remote work will stay? Tell us in the comment section below. If you like this video, don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to never miss new videos about VFX and its history. Thank you so much for watching.